Morning, Peter.
Morning.
Just to start kind of generally, obviously, I'm sure you're not in the spot in the standings you would like to be. What is an area or two where you feel the team hasn't been able to, achieve or meet the expectations that you were hoping for?
Well, yeah, obviously, I'm disappointed as to where we are. There's a number of areas. It's a little bit of a death by 1,000 cuts right now. So when you're patching up one area and another area opens up. At one point it was scoring. It's still a little bit. I think we generate a lot of chances. But then at another point it was defending, which includes goaltending. So our specialty teams are improving. There was only one way to go but up on them. Our power play had bumped up a little bit and it's dropping down a little bit, but in general they are improving, and they still have to get better. So there's a number of areas, Reed, and I know our staff is addressing them one by one, but you go on a road trip like this last one and you have 2 good games and 3 not good games. You'd like a little more consistency. So there's a little smattering for you for now.
So clearly some areas where a general manager makes calls in the summer. Your right side, your depth on defense, your depth scoring, maybe your backup goaltending. When you make those
any more?
When you make those calls and they don't pan out, how do you fix them in the season?
Well, it's fair to say that they're not panning out in general, Spec. Part of being a GM is you have to balance fixing and going with your gut, and then applying a little bit of patience. That's not to say that we're not trying to fix these things. You mentioned right side, depth on D. What else? Depth and scoring. What? Backup goalie. Anything else? Starting goalie. So I guess my point is that there's a lot of things that aren't going right at this point, and we're trying to work our way through it. So your question was urgency to fix, or as GM making the calls and they're not going right. What was your question?
How do you fix it once the season started?
Well, I guess again, there's a balance. You have to let these things play out to a certain degree. You have to act when you think that they're not getting fixed. So each of those ones, I look at them individually, and how do you fix it? You have to look externally, you have to look internally, you have to look at your coaching staff, you have to look at your management staff, you have to look at, you look at a lot of different things, Mark. There's no easy answer, right? If that's what you're getting at, there's no easy answer. No one's going to help us right now. There are opportunities. We've been beating the bushes a little bit, but and there are things that are coming around. So you basically just have to be on top of it, and we hope that we are, and we're just going to continue to try and fix these things.
Peter, with the excess cap that you have, was your strategy to try to fill some of that before the season began and it didn't pan out, or were you waiting, hoping the team would be good and you would add at the deadline?
Again, something you look at options that are available during the summer on that. It's a little harder because you have to look beyond this year on the cap situation, Jason. So you're into a little different dynamic that way, in the sense that you can't extend out too far when you want to use it. We do have cap space now. We are in a position to use it, and certainly we're looking at opportunities for our group. It's just hard to shake these things loose right now. We're early into the year, and as I said to Mark, no one's going to jump out and really help us. But we do have, I know there's been a line of thinking, why haven't we spent this? You have to spend it wisely, and when you're in the summer, these things can hamstring you in the future too, if you have to extend out guys more than you would want.
Do you think, Peter, just to Spec's question, in some of the bets maybe you made on certain players, whether it was Kajula or Slepyshev, Puljujärvi, in hindsight, betting on players that hadn't done it yet Is there a risk in that? And was that maybe part of what has gone wrong, is that you bet on guys that hadn't done things yet, hadn't accomplished these things yet, and you were hoping they'd be able to fit in and push new levels?
Those bets aren't lost wagers yet, Ryan. And part of, I guess, the broader picture here, and understanding the success we had last year, the broader picture here is that we have to get these players in our lineup at some point. And these are players that you want to grow with your organization. These are players that are going to contribute to your success now and in the future. So it's not a short-term bet, and I'm not suggesting you're alluding to a short-term bet, but I think people think that way. These are good players that are going to become better players, and you have to let them grow in whatever form you decide, whether it's in the lineup, whether it's out of the lineup, whether it's in Bakersfield. And these players had success to a certain degree last year that you would want to make those decisions on them. So the alternative to those players, those bets, are, again, players that may not fit into future plans due to contract restraints. They are, they're just not part of a grander plan. And you look at this grander plan right now, and I can understand people are disappointed, but these are players that we're still willing to wager on, and we just we're a little behind on them right now. They're maybe the three that you mentioned, Pujaravi, Kajula, Slepyshev. They haven't, obviously, for a variety of reasons, performed to where they are. But I've seen in the 8 games Jesse's been up here, 6 of them have been very good games. So I've seen progress there. I've seen his game be relatively mistake-free. There have been mistakes, but I look across the league with younger players, and they make mistakes, and you gotta work them into the lineup, which we've been doing. I look at Slepyshev; he's been hurt. I don't know how to, we all have injuries, so I'm not making an excuse. I look at Drake. He could be better. So on those 3, not willing to throw in the wager yet, but I understand your question.
Peter, when you look at your team, is it tough to get an honest read on them? Because there's nights where they look like world beaters and they play great and they have performances, and then other nights they just look disinterested, I guess. Is it kind of really get a good read on what team you exactly have and what you have to do to make it better?
Yeah, it is, and that's what happens. There's been, as I said, there's been a lot of up and down to our game, and I go back to earlier what I said about a death by 1,000 cuts. There's a lot of little things that compound. So you can look at each of them and try and fix each of them, but they're not, I guess collectively they create a problem and put us in the position we're in. Individually they can be fixed, it's just getting to them. It's still early. We are where we are, and it's a tough spot, but I do believe that this team has the ability to get out of it. That doesn't mean that we won't look at making moves.
A couple of questions, Peter. Did you miscalculate, or were you upset that your coach says your team's not quick enough? And yet last year your team was quick enough, and I know the league gets faster every year, but there's lots of nights the other team looks quicker than you. And the other question is, would you be in this position if your number 1 defenseman, Oscar Klefbom, was playing like a number 1 and your number 1 goaltender was playing like he did last year?
Again, back to a death by 1,000 cuts, Jim. As to the quick, I don't really see a difference. We do the quick equation every year when you're adding and subtracting players, and no, it doesn't upset me. I mean, he's got his feelings. I don't think that is an issue. I know it's a party line amongst the media pundits, but when we move the puck, when we break out cleanly and through the neutral zone, we're a quick team. When you go player to player on paper, sometimes we don't look as quick as others, but I see what you see, Jim. There are nights when we look slow, but you have to look at how we break the puck out. Back to Clef, yeah, he's having obviously a subpar season. And, there are reasons behind his season. There are reasons behind our goaltending being subpar this year, and we're trying to fix them. But yes, if those things were fine, we'd be better. But they're not fine at this point.
Peter, you've been in the league a long time. I don't know if you've ever seen a team that when the Oilers win, they almost dominate and look great. And when they lose, there's been a lot of games where they really haven't been in it. Like, it's very Jekyll and Hyde from your group. Is that just inconsistency? I mean, is it a lack of confidence? What is it from your group that you can see such an obvious difference from literally St. Louis, Detroit, Buffalo, Boston, and that's kind of categorized the whole year?
Well, for me, there's a number of things, Jason, but it goes back to mental. When you look at swings like that, and goes back to a little bit what we talked about in the summer about managing expectations, and I think things can spiral a little bit mentally. So you have a real good game like that, and you get into a little consciously or subconsciously, you get into a comfort level, and I think you end up consciously or subconsciously underestimating the opponent. So I think that happens a little bit. Trust me, we've been looking at these swings, and they're hard to, they're hard to really pin down. Had a lot of discussions with the coaching staff and everyone on it. I wish I had a more concrete answer for you, but I think obviously part of it's mental when you have such a swing in performance from game to game.
So Peter, I'm sure the question is being asked out there. If this trend continues, doing well one game and then underachieving the next, when you're expected to maybe try to carry on that momentum, how long of a leash do you give this club, or are you going to be forced into doing anything if that kind of continues?
Yeah, I don't think that is a question worth, or at least that I can answer right now with complete accuracy. Like, we're in second last in our division. We're third or fourth last, second last in the league. It's obviously a spot where we are very disappointed that we're in. You have to be obviously vigilant on this type of stuff to answer your question a little bit, but you can't overreact in the sense that you can't just blow things up. So I can't answer at this point. If this goes on, okay. So a little bit to Jason's question, of our last 3 games, we've played 2 pretty good games. But then you look at the middle game, and so how do you rectify that as a manager? Where does that come from? So we have to do. We obviously have been looking at this deeply, and we have to continue to look at it. This, by the way, this doesn't mean that we're not looking at, as I said, other opportunities, players that are out there. And this doesn't mean that we're going to be patient all year with this group. It just means that we're trying to figure it out. We'd like to see some traction somewhere, and if we don't, we have to, we're going to have to take a different tact. I don't know when that is.
Can you maybe just address special teams? And they were a strength last season. This season they've started really bad, as you said. They've come up a bit but are dipping. The inconsistency in the special teams, given the personnel is largely the same, your concern level of that, and maybe what you're seeing out of the staff in trying to elicit change there.
Just clarify your second part of your question.
About the staff?
Yeah.
Am
I satisfied with the staff? Is that what
the job the staff is doing with the same players they had last year, but with such results?
The special teams are something that I think is the first thing everyone looks at when they look at the coaches, and to a certain degree that's justifiable. I know they've worked hard at both of them, and our start on PK was bad. That's tough to recover, but there has been a level of improvement. So I think you have to look at it from certain junctures. There are different approaches on the PK that they've looked at and employed. Again, not to put it on our goaltending either, but often your best PK personnel is your goaltender, and so he has to get better also. On the power play, you know, we were improving, and it's obviously something that that can get you out of this. If you get a couple of touches on the power play and goals, I think the confidence level of the group comes up. It's something, Ryan, that we look at. I know the staff looks at, and probably focuses a lot on. Sometimes maybe over-focuses it, and because they want to get it right, because it is an important component. At this point, you know, I'm satisfied with what the staff are doing on it. They know it has to get better. There has been increments, but we have to put it all together.
We're all sort of dancing around the same thing here. Somehow the chemistry of this team went from very good to not very good. As you assess it, is this a players in, players out thing, which would, I guess, be more your responsibility? Is it the fact that the players you have aren't playing as well as they played last year? What happened to the chemistry on this team that was so strong, and now they can't win 2 games in a row?
Again, chemistry. What is chemistry? What is what is the difference between attitude and chemistry? And Todd and I met and we talked at length over the summer regarding managing expectations, and we talked about the Flames a couple years ago when they made it, and then they didn't make it the next year, and they had great expectations, and so is that chemistry that these guys are having trouble dealing with the expectations? Maybe it's one big continuum. It flows into chemistry. I don't know. Like to what I've seen, I've been with this team a fair bit this year. The chemistry, the in-room stuff, seems fine. So, at what point is it just trying to get maybe focus and managing expectations? I can see why you might say that it's chemistry, and maybe it is to a certain degree, but to me, it's when these guys have to get focus and kind of get going to do their job, and a lot of it stems from where they think they should have been, maybe on what they saw, but all the projections over the summer and how the year ended last year.